Hey, good morning, guys. As always, we hope you had an amazing last couple of days. Maybe you had some time off from work, had some time to spend with your family or friends, and we hope it was just a good one. Well, this morning and in the last couple of weeks, God has really just been impressing on my heart the importance of coming and just being thankful. And I would just encourage you, maybe you could pause this podcast for a couple of minutes and just thank God wherever you are for things He's given you this morning. All right, so as we start on to this morning's podcast, one of the topics that you hear a lot is God will never give you more than you can handle. And for a while, I was trying to think to myself, where can I find that in the Bible? And is it in the Bible? And I will tell you that it most certainly is. And one of the books that we're going to focus on the chapter is Mark. And if you've been following with us the last couple of weeks, we've been really focusing on Mark. And in the next couple of weeks, we might jump into a couple little oddballs of seeing some other topics in other books. But for right now, we're going to stay in Mark. And so in Mark 4, verse 35, it says, "On that day when evening had come, Jesus said to them, 'Let us go across to the other side.' And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking in the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, which I believe is below the boat, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, 'Why are you so afraid? Have you no little faith?' And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, 'Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?'" And so along those lines, and we talk about the topic of God will never give us more than we can handle. The reality is that doesn't mean that God will not lead you into situations that might be testing of your faith. And just like anything else, you're not going to, in a sense, get better at a sport unless you practice, right? Now, how do we practice faith? I think a lot of times it's going through situations, circumstances, and God does allow things, I believe, and in order to grow our faith. Now, it does say in the Bible we've all been given a measure of faith, but we can grow in it. And so, as we look at this story, Jesus takes the disciples from where they were at, and he crosses this sea. And in the midst of this sea, a storm comes in, and Jesus is at peace. I think he was pretty much always at peace, with the exception of maybe right before he was taken to the cross. But that's a whole nother story. And so, as Jesus is going through this, he's at the bottom of the boat sleeping, and the disciples are freaking out. Well, they go down and they wake him up to calm the storm, and the reality is that Jesus is not taking them across the sea. He knew the storm was coming, I believe, but he was not taking them across the sea in order for them to be destroyed. And I want to encourage you this morning that you might be going through a storm. It may even feel like a hurricane. And, living in Florida, those are some of the things that we are more fearful of, is the hurricanes. But the reality is that I believe that God is not leading you in this position for your destruction. In the same way that Jesus was not leading the disciples across the sea for destruction, I think it was actually in the testing of their faith. And, I would say that because at the end of the chapter, at the end of the story, he says, "Why do you have such little faith?" They had just gone through many situations where Jesus had brought healing, and I'm sure they saw many things that we don't even have written down in the Bible. But he was saying, "Why are you of little faith?" And so, in that time of the storm, the disciples were freaking out. And I believe that what they were doing was they were questioning the intentions and the integrity of God. And I'll be honest that I've been there. I battle with that at times, of wondering, God, where are you? Why is this going on? Why have I not walked through this yet? Why have I not seen the stillness in the storms? And the reality is that we look down, and God is a good God. He's a good Father, and He loves you. He really does. And sometimes we focus too much on the storm, and we forget the one who's resting with us and resting right near us, and that is Jesus. And so in the midst of this time, I want to encourage you in the midst of this week that no matter what you're going through, cry out to Jesus. And I also want to build the faith knowing that Jesus is with you through this all and he knows what he is doing. He is in control, and a storm, whether it's a physical or an emotional or a mental or a financial or a relational, the storms that you go through are literally nothing to Jesus. They are not greater than him. They are not. They cannot even come close to standing face to face with Jesus. And so I just encourage you this week. We just want to encourage you to lean into Jesus. Give your worries and your burdens to him. And he says to do that. And we'll cover that later on. But just know that we love you. We're praying for you. We hope you have an amazing week. And we look forward to catching up with you next week.